Sometime around 2002, three men sit down for lunch at a restaurant in Baltimore. The first man is a former newspaper reporter. The second is a former police detective. The third is a former drug lord. The reporter covered the drug lord's arrest. The detective built the case that put the drug lord in prison. The drug lord did 18 years because of them. And now all three of them are eating lunch together, because the reporter and the detective have just created a television show for HBO based on the drug lord's life, based on the detective's investigation, based on the reporter's articles, based on the corners, the stash houses, the wiretaps, and the bodies that all three of them knew by name. The show is called The Wire. Over lunch, the reporter looks at the drug lord, the man whose empire he chronicled, whose arrest he covered, whose prison sentence he watched play out, and asks him a question. Have you ever considered acting? The drug lord says yes. And that is how Melvin Williams, the man who ran Baltimore's streets for 3 decades, who sold what he claimed was $1 billion in product, who stopped a riot that the National Guard could not stop, ended up playing a Reformed church deacon in the television show based on his own life, sitting in scenes with actors playing characters based on his dealers, walking the same corners his empire built, wearing a suit and tie in the same neighborhoods where he once wore leather and carried a gun. The cop who arrested him vouched for the role. This is the most insane story in the history of television, and almost nobody knows it happened. Melvin Douglas Williams was born December 14, 1941, in Baltimore City Hospital. His father drove a cab. His mother was a nurse's aide. They raised him on Madison Avenue in West Baltimore. Normal family, normal house. Nothing about the Williams household suggested what was coming, but Melvin had something. Teachers noticed it early. The boy had a genius-level IQ, not smart for his age, genius, the kind of mind that processes information faster than the people around it can deliver. He attended Garnet Elementary School, then Frederick Douglass High School, then transferred to City College, one of Baltimore's best public schools. He dropped out in the 11th grade, not because he couldn't do the work, because he'd already found a classroom that paid better. Pennsylvania Avenue. In the 1950s and early 1960s, Pennsylvania Avenue was the beating heart of Black Baltimore. Jazz clubs, pool halls, juke joints, gambling dens behind every other door. The Royal Theater hosted James Brown, Ray Charles, Billie Holiday. The Strip was alive. And in the back rooms, the real education happened. By age 12, Melvin Williams was sitting in those gambling dens, not watching, playing, beating grown men, beating gang members, beating crime bosses, winning thousands of dollars against men 3 times his age. A child prodigy, not of music, not of mathematics, of the hustle. By age 15, according to the documentary Life in the Game, Melvin Williams was already a millionaire. 15 years old, genius IQ, $1 million, and an entire avenue that knew his name. He wasn't Little Melvin because of his size. He was Little Melvin because of his age. Every prodigy needs a teacher, and Melvin found the most dangerous one in Baltimore, Julius Salisbury, known as the Lord. Salisbury was a Jewish gangster who ran gambling operations across Baltimore, including numbers, bookmaking, and high-stakes card games. He was soft-spoken, aristocratic, sharp-featured, the kind of man who dressed like a banker and moved like a predator. Salisbury took one look at the kid from Madison Avenue and saw what everybody else saw, a mind that could run an empire. He took Melvin under his wing, taught him the fundamentals, not just gambling anymore, supply lines, organization, how to compartmentalize, keep yourself away from the product while controlling an every gram that moves through your territory. And most importantly, Salisbury connected Melvin to New York. That connection changed everything, because New York had the supply, Baltimore had the demand, and Melvin Williams was about to become the bridge. By the mid-1960s, Williams had transitioned from gambling prodigy to full-scale trafficking. Product flowed down from New York. Money flowed back up. And Pennsylvania Avenue, the strip where Melvin had been hustling since he was 12, became the most profitable corridor in Baltimore. Not a single block. An avenue, miles of it, all flowing through one man. David Simon, who would later create The Wire, described Williams in his own words: West Baltimore's man-child, quick-witted and calculating, a prodigy from Pennsylvania Avenue's pool halls and juke joints, where the hustler's game was played night after night. By 1967, the authorities could not ignore it anymore. Williams was arrested for possession, for selling, and for carrying a firearm. A criminal court judge named Anselm Sodaro looked at the 26-year-old standing in his courtroom and told him, the judge called him a big fish in the nefarious traffic of slow death. He sentenced Williams to 12 years. Williams told the Afro newspaper he was framed by a corrupt narcotics detective. He served time. He came back. And he came back bigger. April 4th, 1968, Memphis, Tennessee. An assassin's bullet killed the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. 2 days later, Baltimore explodes. Stores on fire, windows smashed, looting from one end of the city to the other. The governor calls in the National Guard, thousands of troops, 500 state police. It is not enough. The governor calls the president. President Lyndon Johnson sends 5,000 paratroopers from Fort Bragg, combat engineers, artillerymen, bayonets fixed, chemical dispersers strapped to their backs, 6 people dead, 700 injured, 4,500 arrested, over 1,000 fires, 1,000 businesses looted or burned. The damage will be estimated at $10 million. And in the middle of it all, the mayor of Baltimore, Tommy D'Alessandro III, does something that nobody expected. He calls a drug lord. He calls Little Melvin Williams. Because the National Guard can clear a street, but they cannot calm a neighborhood. The police can arrest rioters, but they cannot stop the rage. The only man who could walk down Pennsylvania Avenue and make people listen was not a politician. He was not a preacher. He was not a general. It was the man who ran the avenue. Williams made the calls. He brought the hustlers together from East Baltimore, South Baltimore, and West Baltimore. He made appeals, not speeches. Appeals, man to man, corner to corner. The next day, the riots stopped on Pennsylvania Avenue. A photograph ran on the front page of the Baltimore News American. In the picture, little Melvin Williams, wearing a leather jacket, stood next to Major General George Gelston, the commander of the Maryland National Guard. A drug lord and a general, side by side, on the front page. The man the judge had called a big fish in the nefarious traffic of slow death had just done what the National Guard, the state police, and 5,000 paratroopers could not do. And then he went right back to business. Through the 1970s and into the early 1980s, Little Melvin Williams built one of the most sophisticated operations on the East Coast. His organization ran like a corporation, compartmentalized, layered, street-level runners who never touched the supply, lieutenants who managed territory, enforcers who handled problems. And at the top, Melvin, always at a distance, always insulated, always wearing dark clothing, black suits, black shirts, which earned him one of his other nicknames, Black. He developed a communication system using payphones and the new technology of portable pagers, originally designed for doctors. His people used coded pager messages to coordinate deliveries and avoid police wiretaps. It was years ahead of what other operations were doing. His operation controlled Pennsylvania Avenue and stretched across West Baltimore. Federal prosecutors would later estimate that his network grossed $1 million a day. $1 million per day. In the FX documentary Tapping the Wire, Williams himself said he made at least a couple $100 million through trafficking. In 2012, he went further. He claimed he had sold more than $1 billion in product in his lifetime. And according to David Simon's research for the Baltimore Sun, Williams' organization was responsible for 25% of all murders in Baltimore during its peak. A quarter of the city's murders. One operation, one man at the top. He lived accordingly. Luxury cars, diamonds, furs, a Park Avenue fortress. The kind of lifestyle that makes you untouchable until the day it doesn't. In the early 1980s, a Baltimore Police Department detective named Edward Burns was assigned to investigate Melvin Williams. Burns was patient, methodical, relentless. He did not kick in doors. He did not chase runners. He did something far more dangerous to a man like Melvin Williams. He listened. Burns ran a 2-year wiretap investigation, painstakingly combing through pager records, turning underlings into informants, mapping the legitimate business fronts that Williams used to distance himself from the product, and following the money through tax records, property filings, and bank transactions. 2 years, quietly, while Williams thought he was untouchable. On December 6, 1984, a consortium of city, state, and federal agents descended on Williams's Park Avenue fortress. They seized a Bugatti valued at $54,000. They seized $250,000 worth of diamonds, furs, and jewelry. They seized nearly $300,000 in cash. They also seized guns. On February 7, 1985, Melvin Williams was convicted and sentenced to 34 years in federal prison. He was sent to Lewisburg Federal Penitentiary. The IRS came next, assessing $425,000 in back taxes. They seized his home. The king of Pennsylvania Avenue was gone, and the detective who took him down, Ed Burns, would eventually quit the police force, become a teacher in Baltimore public schools, and then do something that nobody could have predicted. He became a television writer, but that part comes later. While Melvin Williams sat in Lewisburg, a young reporter at the Baltimore Sun was building his own career on the same streets Williams had ruled. His name was David Simon. In 1987, Simon published a 5-part investigative series called Easy Money: Anatomy of a Drug Empire. It was the most detailed treatment of Williams's criminal career ever written. Simon had spent months on it, interviewing sources, reviewing court records, and walking the corners that Williams had controlled. The series laid bare how Williams built his operation: the supply lines, the organization, the money, the violence, and the human cost, the addicts, the families, the neighborhoods hollowed out block by block. Simon was fascinated by Williams, not as a criminal, as a system. Williams was not just a man dealing product. He was a machine, and the machine told a story about what was happening to American cities. Simon filed the series away, moved on to other stories, but he never forgot Melvin Williams, never forgot Pennsylvania Avenue, never forgot what the product did to Baltimore. 15 years later, he would turn all of it into a television show. In 2002, HBO premiered a new drama called The Wire, created by David Simon, co-written by Ed Burns, the reporter who covered Williams, the detective who arrested Williams. Together, they made television. The show was set in Baltimore on the West Side, on corners that Melvin Williams had controlled. The wiretap investigation in Season 1 was based directly on Burns's investigation of Williams. The stash houses, the pagers, the coded communication system. the layered organization designed to insulate the boss from the street. The character of Avon Barksdale, the charismatic, old-school Kingpin who ran West Baltimore from the towers, was inspired by Melvin Williams. Not a direct copy, but the DNA was there. The loyalty, the business mind, the code, the inability to leave the game even when the game was killing everything around him. The Wire would run for 5 seasons, 60 episodes. It would be called the greatest television drama ever made by critics, academics, journalists, and audiences around the world. And it existed because a reporter wrote about a drug lord, a detective arrested that drug lord, and both of them turned that experience into art. But the story wasn't done yet, because the drug lord was about to walk back into the picture. David Simon told the story himself after Williams died. Sometime after Williams's release, Simon arranged a lunch. 3 men at a restaurant in Baltimore: Simon, Burns, and Williams. The reporter, the detective, the drug lord. It was 18 years after Burns had put Williams in prison. They sat across the same table, ordering drinks. Burns ordered an iced tea. Simon had a glass of the house red. Williams showed up late with a 4th guest. His driver that day was a man whom Simon immediately recognized as a former informant from Burns's narcotics cases. Burns did not flinch. He shook the man's hand and said, "Nice to meet you," playing it clean. The informant looked like he wanted to disappear through the floor. They ate, they talked about the city, about what had changed, about what had not. Leaving the restaurant, Williams handed Simon a business card with his phone number scrawled on it. Burns looked at the digits and laughed. Burns said, "What I would not have done for that 20 years ago." Then Burns told Williams something that carried the weight of everything between them. Burns said, "Stay free." Williams replied, "I intend to do just that." A week later, Simon called Williams back with an offer. It would be too provocative, Simon figured, to cast the city's most notorious trafficker as a gangster on the wire. But there was another role: a church deacon, a reformed man, a man who counsels troubled people in West Baltimore, helping them find a way out. Simon told Williams that a lunch with Melvin Williams suggests that he is already quite a performer. Williams took the role. Starting in Season 3, episode All Due Respect, Melvin Williams appeared on The Wire as the deacon, a wise, battle-scarred church figure on the West Side, a man with contacts everywhere, in the streets, in City Hall, in the academic world, a man who helps an ex-convict named Cuddy open a boxing gym, who connects him with politicians who can cut through the red tape, who quietly steers broken men away from the game without ever raising his voice. The deacon was the man Melvin Williams wished he had been all along, and here is what nobody watching at home understood. The actor playing the deacon had once run the very corners they were filming on. The stash houses in the show were inspired by his stash houses. The pager codes the characters used were based on his communication system. The wiretap that drives Season 1 was based on the investigation that put him in prison. And the CO writer of the show, E.D. Burns, was the detective who had listened to his phone calls for 2 years. Williams sat in scenes with actors playing characters inspired by his own operation. He gave fictional advice about leaving the game, advice he had spent decades learning the hard way. He wore a suit and tie in neighborhoods where he had once worn leather and carried a weapon. The cop who arrested him had vouched for his casting. The reporter who covered his arrest had offered him the role. There has never been anything like it in the history of television. A real drug lord playing a reformed version of himself in a show based on his own arrest, created by the men who covered and executed that arrest. The Wire ran through Season 5. Williams appeared in Seasons 3, 4, and 5. He was not playing a character. He was playing a ghost. the man he might have been if he had made different choices at 12 years old in those gambling dens on Pennsylvania Avenue. But Melvin Williams's story did not end with redemption. In March 1999, while on parole, Williams was convicted of a new offense. He was sentenced to 22 years in December 2000. The streets pulled at him even after everything. But his attorney, Michael Marr, successfully argued that the sentence exceeded mandatory guidelines. The conviction was overturned. Williams walked free in 2003, and this time something stuck. He told U.S. District Judge Marvin Garbus during a court appearance that sometime in his 50s, he became aware that there was a God in charge and not a Melvin. He became an ordained minister. He ran Saturday training sessions for young people at his building on North Avenue. He brought in lawyers to teach kids about the criminal justice system. He traveled to Chester, Pennsylvania, and Atlanta, Georgia, helping gang members find their way out. A former gang member named Ted Sutton said that Melvin took him under his wing and helped him to see things differently. He said Melvin spoke to young men and taught them self-respect and the law, and that they would listen to him. They listened because he was not a politician telling them what to do. He was not a preacher who had never seen the streets. He was Melvin Williams, the man who ran Pennsylvania Avenue, the man who stopped the 1968 riots, the man who sold $1 billion in product and did the time for it. When Melvin Williams told you the game was not worth it, you listened, because he had played it at the highest level and lost everything. David Simon, after Williams died, wrote that Melvin did a lot of damage, and he would be the first to admit it. He was a fascinating man in terms of Baltimore and what the product war was going to do to this country. On December 3rd, 2015, 11 days before his 74th birthday, Melvin Douglas Williams died at the University of Maryland Medical Center. Cancer. He was survived by his wife, Mary, and 2 daughters. Reverend Frank Reed III, pastor of Bethel AME Church, the church Williams had attended in his final years, said it simply that Melvin Williams is a Baltimore 20th century legend. Former Mayor Kurt Schmoke said that he became the symbol of crime problems in the city, whether he wanted to or not. In his later years, he tried to improve himself and help the community. Former Baltimore Police Commissioner Leonard Hamm knew him well. He said he knew of his notoriety and his antics on Pennsylvania Avenue. Pennsylvania Avenue, that is where it all started. Where a 12-year-old genius sat down at a card table and beat men who should have known better. Where a 15-year-old became a millionaire. Where a 26-year-old built an empire. Where a drug lord stopped a riot that 5,000 soldiers could not stop. Where a detective listened through a wiretap for 2 years. Where a reporter wrote 5 articles that would change television forever. Pennsylvania Avenue is where The Wire was born, not in a Hollywood writer's room, not on an HBO lot, but on a strip in West Baltimore where a kid with a genius IQ chose the wrong classroom. The corners are still there, the towers are gone, the Royal Theater is gone, the pool halls are gone, but The Wire is still streaming. 60 episodes, millions of viewers, called the greatest television drama ever made. And every frame of it traces back to one man. A man who ran those streets, who got arrested by the cop who wrote the show, who got profiled by the reporter who created the show, who got invited to play a reformed version of himself in the show, and who died knowing that his life, all of it, the genius and the damage, the riots and the prison, the diamonds and the pager codes, had become the most important story ever told about what America did to its cities. Melvin Williams did not just inspire The Wire, he was The Wire. And The Wire was Pennsylvania Avenue. And Pennsylvania Avenue was a 12-year-old boy who was too smart for the world he was born into.